Did you notice that your chair's higher than mine, and that puts you in a position of authority?
Kind of remember. Okay, being the history buff that I am,
or smarter than me, or
yeah,
all those feelings.
I should lower it. I should lower it
small and you being big.
Well, interesting fact is President Johnson on Air Force One, they called it the throne. He had a chair that was purposely higher than anybody else's, where he would talk down to them.
Was he a short guy or just?
I'm not sure on that, but he was. I think he was a pretty large guy. But he literally, and I saw a special on the History Channel. They talked about how he had this chair, and it was purposely higher than anybody else that would be sitting around the table on Air Force One. And I believe that plane you can actually go through at the Boeing Museum up in Kansas.
I'm gonna do all these things. I'm gonna read up today. Hey everybody, Matt Hill. I'm here with a dear friend of mine. I've known him a very long time. We went to church together, and man, that was in high school, and
survived Falls Creek
together. Made many mistakes over our lives to learn from and create opportunities for learning.
Yep.
That's the best way to put it. Is like we should always take advantage of all the opportunities we've made for ourselves for learning.
Yep.
And lo and behold, as we've gotten to our careers, we've seen each other enough to where this is a long time in the making, where I can hopefully get what you do out there to people. But if anything, I'm always appreciative and inspired by you.
Man, I appreciate it, Matt. Yeah,
Introduce yourself.
So my name is Thomas Brewer. Like I said, Matt and I grew up together in Midwest City. So I went
One of the places. But you were kind enough whenever the oil bust happened and we ended up having to leave my comfy spot in Northwest Oklahoma, unaware of a bigger world out there. You and everybody at that church took me in and kept me off of my own path of rebelling and being a wild child.
Well, I look back on that, and we were blessed. We had, I think, the best youth pastor in the entire world.
Best youth pastor ever made.
Yeah,
Jimmy Tribble.
Yeah, and we went to his retirement thing a few months ago, and it was amazing. Everybody came in from all over the country for it, and that just tells you the impact he made. But so Thomas Brewer, I actually, as I got out of high school, surrendered into the ministry. Have went through so many different ministry locations and opportunities over the year. Went to Oklahoma Baptist University after going to Rose State, and at that time I worked for the Oklahoma Baptist, helped put on Falls Creek and other things, and traveled the state. And I just always thought I was going to be a speaker guy, and thought I'd do camps, be a youth evangelist, speaking in churches. But back in 2002, 2003, I call it my great interruption, where one night I stopped by Starbucks, had a cup of coffee, and met two state troopers, and struck up a conversation with them, and lo and behold, became, not long after that, a law enforcement chaplain. And now for 23 years, I've served as a law enforcement chaplain with several agencies across Oklahoma. And as a volunteer, got into the mental health, critical response, critical incidents, crisis through specialized training I got through the police department, through the chaplaincy. And then fast forward a few years after I started as a chaplain, now one of my board members missed a phone call. And then I got a call and responded to a company that had a death, and helped them through that process. Just thought it was because of being a chaplain. Well, it was actually an employee assistance program company that was providing that service. I did not realize at the time I was working for them, but I was. And 13 years later, I still consult for that same company. I was actually out for them last week, and will be later this week. But it developed in me a passion for mental health, for critical incidents. Got hooked up in the oil and gas market through that company, and realized, because of my law enforcement training, actually getting to be an officer for a short time, but what I've seen, what I've observed when it comes to manufacturing heavy equipment, oil and gas, that when I respond to these work sites, to these companies where there's been a death or a fatality, these men and women can go into detail of what they observed, what they saw, what's affecting them if they want to, and I'm not going to be grabbing the trash can. I've been exposed to a lot of grotesque scenes. Don't like it. None of us should see it. None of us should have to experience it. But responders do have to deal with that. So when somebody unloads on me in that safe environment and they're talking and they describe something, it's not going to gross me out to the point where I can't handle it.
That is tough stuff. Yeah. That is tough stuff. And our industry. And I've become, and you've seen it. We've talked over the years, and I've grown so much thanks to so many mentors and giants in the industry. I stand on the shoulders of giants, and the networking that you and I do have always, given it we both have these servants' hearts, and that's what keeps us in touch. How can we help others?
Yeah,
and what you do is very, very important, and I appreciate it, and I hope more people realize that there's so many resources out there, and I'm guilty of it most of my life until just recently, not sharing my own burdens with anyone.
Yeah.
And you told me that's ridiculous. There's nothing to be ashamed of, like working through problems, that are bigger than you with the Bible, with God, with your wife, with your work, with your children, and just talking it out, just writing it down. There's a million resources and an availability of people that want to help you get from here to there, and be safe,
absolutely,
and not feel insane.
Yep, absolutely. And as part of the journey that I've also went on, in the midst of all these years of being the responder, being the person people call upon when they're going through a crisis, whether it's a company or an individual, whether it's in the faith-based world or the secular world, where you don't bring up faith, where that's not the primary goal and purpose. I went through a crisis myself where 2.5 years ago, my best friend and my associate with my ministry ended up committing suicide, and then we found out he had a dark past, and he was a serial bank robber and shot a cop who, thank the Lord, the officer lived back in 2003, and just had this dark past. And him and I had traveled all over the country together.
Never suspected.
Never suspected.
I know that story is haunting.
Dude. Oh yeah, but what it did for me was, because of a series of events in those 2 weeks, week and a half that we were dealing with this, when he took his life, he actually committed suicide by jumping off of a high structure. And I didn't realize on that Sunday, at the time, within 20 minutes of him taking his life, I drove within 100 yards of his body, trying to get in touch with him, trying to take him out for lunch because his birthday was the day before. And it screwed me up when a week or two later I realized the time frame and thought, God, if I had just left church early that day, maybe I could have stopped it, which is, I couldn't have, and I know it. But fast forward 5 months later, I'm having severe nightmares, reoccurring nightmares, and they had been going on for about 3 or 4 months. And I actually had to go sit down with a professional, a counterpart, and work through a thing called EMDR, which is, we've used it with our officers, we've used it with military. Great program. I'm such a champion for it. I went through an EMDR session. It only took once for me. It takes other people multiple sessions. But I was able to work through the process. But what I tell people when I do a lot of public speaking on this, and I do a talk called How Trauma Saved My Life in the corporate world.
That's something.
And I tell this whole story. I set it up about my buddy, and but then I kind of like set the hook when I go, oh yeah, by the way, he was a serial bank robber that we never knew about. And then I talk about in detail the 3 reoccurring nightmares I was having, and how I was very tempted to turn to substance abuse to just cope with it. That I was so tired of having the nightmares that was every 2 to 3 nights, here this nightmare was coming, and it was 3 of them reoccurring, 2 of them more prevalent than the third one. So I finally got help, but I tell people all the time, for years. Now, for 20 years, I'd helped other people. I'd helped them get out through critical incidents. I'd helped officers after officer-involved shootings. I'd helped companies, oil and gas guys after explosions and fatalities. I knew all the answers to the questions, but yet I couldn't help myself. I couldn't get over the nightmares. So myself, Thomas, knowing the answers, had to go sit down with a counterpart and another professional who could help me navigate that and help me work through the process, because I couldn't work through the process on my own. I couldn't look in a mirror and walk myself through the process. I had to sit down with a professional. And once I did, I mean, it was like a mountain was lifted off my chest. I've slept like a baby since, and I've traveled all over. I've actually traveled to other states telling the story now about this associate who had this dark past, but I've taken the pain of that story and made it a positive to, show and to let people know, even though I'm passionate about mental health, I'm passionate about good brain health, that even myself, I needed to ask for help, and I couldn't cope it. I couldn't work through it, and as hard as I tried not to have a nightmare, I still had them. So I had to go see a professional, and it's okay to ask for help, and that's really the message of that talk. And when I get to stand before groups, whether it's in the corporate world, civic groups, or even the faith-based world, the message always is it's okay to ask for help.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. Well,
and it was hard. And I will say, it was hard for me to ask for help, because I'm one of those, put on your boots, suck it up. And I always tell people, ask for help. It's okay to ask for help, but
it's something we all say.
Yeah. But I was like, I can get through this. I can work through this.
Do it?
Yeah. And I couldn't. And I knew it was bad. I knew that.
It may not even be help. And maybe we were talking about this, how do we convey it so that people will just give it a whirl. Just try to talk to somebody else. Maybe we shouldn't even say ask for help. Like, hey, look for guidance to grow.
Yep.
How about where you're at now will not always be the place you're at.
Yeah.
And if you want to grow in leadership, if you want to grow as, in your own role just for yourself, whatever you're doing, there is absolute value in seeking out, some kind of guidance or leadership, that's outside of you in your own head.
Absolutely. One of the things in one of the trainings I do is called Pulse Check. And, we do it from the aspect of, will you be a self-pulse checker? Will you pulse check your crew? Basically making sure your head's in the game so you don't get yourself killed or injured, or your crew killed or injured. And it's through a 2-hour program. But I also take an aspect of that, and when I'm teaching, and go, do you pulse check yourself? So like for myself, I pulse check myself throughout the day just to see how I'm doing. How am I responding to my daughters? Am I short with them because I've got pressure with work, that I've got deadlines I've got to get done? I pulse check myself to say, okay, am I being productive in my role, in my jobs, the multiple jobs that I do? Am I growing? Am I learning? Am I reading? Like right now, I'm reading a book about the mental health world. And it's a good read. I'm really enjoying it.
If you're an overthinker, like, and how much time do I have to dedicate to each one of these things in this window of my, sleep and work and eating and feeding?
Absolutely. And it's like, and then not to even beat myself up, because there's times where I go to bed at night going, dadgum, I didn't get enough done today.
What did I?
Yeah, what did I leave on the table?
What did I leave on the table? Did I give it 110%?
Yeah.
Today?
So, one of the things I try to do is my mentor in ministry.
Did you give it 110% today?
Yeah. He gave me a phrase years ago, and I've just lived off this phrase. He said, Thomas, respond today the way in which you want to retell the story in 5 or 10 years, but when you retell the story, you don't have to embellish the truth. Oof. And I was going through a crisis in my personal life, and he gave me that for that crisis. But I've taken that phrase and I use it in a lot of my trainings to go, how we respond professionally, personally, relationally, crisis, whatever it might be, respond today the way I want to retell the story in 5 or 10 years. But when I retell the story in 5 or 10 years, I don't have to lie, and I don't have to candy coat it and add flowers to it, respond today the way I want to retell the story. And that's just a constant reminder to me to give it my best effort, respond well, whether it's work, whether it's professionally, emotionally, whatever I'm doing, respond the way I want to retell the story in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to lie in the future.
Yeah, there's value in that. I mean, I make mistakes every day.
Oh yeah, and well, I will preface this. A lot of times I don't respond the way I want to, and
hindsight,
you're just like, dadgummit.
Here's 50 positive ways I could have responded, and I didn't.
Yeah, absolutely, and and it's not only professionally, it's not only personally with my children and relationships, but it's in also just mentally and work ethic. One of the things that I tell people all the time, our harshest critic is ourselves up here between the ears. That it's that time.
No one lives up here but me.
And it's that thought. I've said all the time, and I say it all the time, and I was actually speaking at a church and a couple of Sundays ago when I was preaching in a church, and I made the comment, we would never allow somebody to talk down to us or talk to us in the way that we talk to ourselves.
Okay.
So, I mean, I used myself as my own example. I said, I talk to myself and I criticize me in a way, if somebody was talking to me like that, I would turn their other cheek. I would never allow anybody to put me down or criticize me as bad as I criticize myself most times. So why do I do that? And it's getting those thoughts under control and realizing, we're not perfect. We don't always respond well. We don't always do everything right with our jobs, but are we pushing for greatness? Are we pushing to be better? And I think that's really just what we need to do, is each day put one step in front of the other to say, I'm going to try to be better at this point, this point, this point, and this point, but also having a chance to basically pulse check yourself, where you go back and then you go, have I done well? And if not, how do I improve? But don't beat yourself up. Just go, okay, dude, I messed up. We all mess up. Let's keep pushing forward.
Well, I sought you out to make you a victim on this podcast because I think you would add a lot of value to more oil and gas guys that I am tender about now. And I just transparency. I want to promote you and what you do, and I know you're only one person, but there's lots of resources out there that are available, and I just I've seen over my career, and for myself, I don't know if I've ever been busier. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm more productive, but I know I've never been busier. And everybody out there, it just feels like there's a lot of weight on a lot of shoulders.
There is,
and with our industry ups and downs, with the way maybe society doesn't portray, oil and gas, the way we know the real value is there. It just really helps to, first of all, our own community helps by just being able to breathe in our networking events and knowing that we're amongst friends and colleagues, and we all understand just the value of what we do, and then we can come together and hopefully we'll educate the rest of society. But if not, I know our industry will keep plugging away at delivering the industry, whether they value it or not.
Absolutely. And
so you're a great resource.
Well, and I appreciate that. One of the biggest challenges the hurdle I'm trying to overcome is being proactive with these companies, and these companies allowing me to be proactive with them. Meaning, I get asked.
People don't get to the point of emergency mental health. It becomes more of a, hey, this is an ongoing structure. This guy can come in once a month, once a quarter, and be available for this time for anybody. And I know all of our, a lot anyway. I mean, my own, like we have a company that offers a mental health aspect to the healthcare, right? But it's somebody I don't know.
Yep.
And they don't understand our industry.
Yeah. So a lot of companies have the employee assistance program.
Right.
They have the EAP, but there's a lot of smaller oil and gas companies that don't because they can't afford that. And that's really an area that I
consultant like you,
like a consultant like me, so they can, contract with me individually. So it's a couple of different looks to it. One look can be it's after a fatality or injury has happened or a death offsite. They hire me to come in, and I do this quite often. I come in and spend X amount of time, whether it's 3 hours, 8 hours, and I don't come in with an agenda. I come in to live life with them, to serve them. I've went to well sites. I've went to yards. I've been in Fortune 500 companies. It doesn't matter where it is. I go to their site, serve them, live life with them, and I'm available if their team, if their employees need to talk. The approach I take is we just have a conversation. We talk about football, we talk about life, and a lot of times those conversations then, spill into, hey, I need to talk about the tragedy that happened. Or a lot of times, actually, Matt, 99% of the time, it's not the tragedy that I'm there responding to, but it's something that happened years ago and they never dealt with, but that brought it up, took the Band-Aid off the wound, and they want to talk about it. And that's good, and I like that. And I love serving during those times. But then there's also the training that I've developed where it's that pulse check training, and I've developed it where it's 2 hours, and it's a peer-to-peer training. So how, like if you're on a crew with somebody, and
this pulse check, I hate to interrupt.
No, you're good.
What I gathered when we first started talking about all of this was just how many of the injuries and deaths could have been prevented if everybody was there pulse checking pre-job.
Oh gosh. I don't
all of them.
I don't have a crystal ball, but I would say 98%. And I've got friends in the safety industry who I've talked to, and when you really, 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 really just deep dive it and really find out, yes, it can be equipment related, but even when it's equipment related, if you really go back and peel back all the layers, I won't say 100% of the time.
Human errors by being distracted by something
at home. Usually off-site, but it's an illness, it's it's something breaking down in the home, a family situation, a death of a loved one, caring for an ill or disabled family member. So in this 2-hour training that I've developed, we look at 4 key areas: caring for an ill or disabled family member long-term, personal property loss, meaning fire, earthquake, ice storm, whatever it might be. Then death, when they're dealing with the death of a family member or a friend. And then the other one's hospitalization. When somebody maybe has a family member in the hospital or one of your team members is in the hospital, one of the things I do, I spend about 10 minutes talking about how do you even make a hospital visit and how many people does it scare? And I go, how many, a lot of times when I do the training, I go, how many of you does it scare the hell out of just thinking that you go to a hospital and make a visit? And I raise my own hand.
Oh, I'm not going to the hospital.
Yeah, and I'm a minister. This is what I've been trained to do.
Go, I'm like, I'll see you when you get out.
Yeah, it scares most people. And so we talk about even just how do you make a hospital visit where you don't walk in and, you knew my father. When my father was sick and he needed, the last 12 years of his life, 24-hour care, I tell a story how the hospital chaplain that knocked on the door and my mom hollered and said, just in a little bit, but the guy couldn't hear well, the chaplain couldn't hear well, he meant well, he opened up the door and came in, my dad was sitting on a bedpan. Well, my dad was, the rancher who was very conservative. It was appalling for, he was embarrassed, and I just
Whereas
said.
you and I have developed the sense of humor where we just hand that guy the bedpan.
Oh, absolutely. But then, I talked about what if that chaplain would have just went by the nurse's station and said, hey, I'm here to see so-and-so. Is it okay to go in right now? And so we talk about that. We just try to take the edge off. But the main thing out of this 2-hour training, and it's not an all-day training because that takes you off the work site, but it's a 2-hour training to make you be a pulse checker of your coworkers, but a pulse checker of yourself. And if you realize somebody's head's not in the game, that's where you either check on them throughout the day or not even allow them in that critical role where they could get themselves hurt or injured or killed, or the whole crew. So it's being proactive ahead of time, and it's basically called safety pulse check training. And
safety pulse check training.
Yeah, it's a two-hour program.
It's working for me.
Yeah, 2-hour program, and I run 20, or maximum number is 20 people at a time. And I use humor. As a speaker, I use a lot of humor, but we use humor.
A lot of self-deprecation for me.
Yeah, I make fun of myself, and so it's 2 hours. It's fun, but it's an informative, and the goal is to go to 0 injuries, 0 fatalities. That's the goal. Now, will accidents happen? Yes, and I don't have a crystal ball. And I've told you, Matt, several times. I've had CEOs, I've had HR people tell me, well, Thomas, if we hire you to come in and train our employees and take them through this training, how many injuries and how many fatalities will your training prevent? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, and I would never even try to put a number on that because I'm not God and I can't do that.
See, this is where I'm business development. I mean, I'm sales. You lie. Say 0. Absolutely 0. From here on out, your goal, if I touched your stuff, you're fine.
Yeah, and, but I say, what if it just prevents one? One injury, because if it's an injury in workman's comp, you're looking at 30, 40,000 just starting out and up. If it's a fatality, it's $1 million. But if it prevents just one, was it worth the cost to get me to come in? Oh, absolutely, they said. So, but yeah, it's just helping people be better. And if you have a crew that cares about each other, I also believe productivity will go up and employee retention will be there. And
we talk about this all the time. How do we even remotely begin to replace our workforce that we need to replace so vitally? I told you I talked to my son not too long ago. He turned 18. We drove to Colorado for his birthday, and I took him skiing. We had a lot of hours in that vehicle to talk, and I was like, what are we missing to get people to join our ranks? And he's like, hey, I've known you my whole life, and he can make an informed decision whether he wants to go in oil and gas, but most people don't. Their only information has been, well, you're super dangerous, oil and gas, you're probably going to die.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have a job anyway.
Yeah.
And it's, dirty and it's bad for the environment. There's so many just negative connotations. It's like, okay, well, we've done a terrible job, but, education, so yeah, I love your ideas on educating people on just the simplest things to get us all the camaraderie we need and to keep us as tight as possible so that we keep everybody we can. The longer we keep people and the longer they're on that mission of their own, safety, leadership, the more people we draw in and the more people we keep.
Oh, absolutely.
Great.
And over the years, I've talked to more people about this, and I know it's a new thought process. You talk to the safety guys in the oil and gas.
I would have laughed at you and I a decade ago, 20 years ago when I'm first coming in oil and gas. I was like, this is the softest conversation I ever want to hear.
Well,
I never want to talk about this.
I responded to
I'm like, get up, we got shit to do.
Yeah, in the oil and gas market, it was after an explosion, and I'll never forget. I walked in to meet with some of the crew, the employees. And one guy, I introduced myself, I shook his hand. He goes, you're not going to make us sit in a circle and cross our legs and hum at each other, are we? And I go, no, what are you talking about?
That's a great idea. Let's do that. I'm a smart ass. Like, oh man, you don't want to do that.
Where's your coat and tie at? And so I go dressed like this, and I actually worked with, after an oil field explosion and fatalities, I worked with one company, and after a few days with them, the HR guy came to me, and it was one of the greatest compliments I got. He goes, when did you work in the patch? I go, what do you mean? He goes, you talk like us, you dress like us, and you eat like us. Because we had went out to eat a couple of times. And I said, I haven't. I said, now, my parents owned a cattle ranch. My dad, did some investing in the oil and gas market. And as a kid in the 80s, I played on work sites I shouldn't have. But I said, I also have friends in the industry. I've had people who, when I was a pastor, worked in the industry, and I listened well. And he goes, because you weren't what we were expecting. We thought as a crisis consultant, mental health consultant, you'd come in, but he said, you just blended like you were one of us. And it's really trying to meet the needs of the people where they're at in a judge-free zone and just living life with them. Because when you allow me to come into your company, on your work site, into your crew, I'm a guest and I don't come in with an agenda, and it's just to live life with you during that difficult time, or helping you be a great company that's going to make more money and be safer in our trainings. And we can do the trainings on site. Well, I'll come to where you are.
I can't speak highly enough about you, Thomas, and I thank you for always being there and when I call you, and giving me your own advice, even though I'm 51.
Yeah, I'm 50, so we're a year apart.
I'm older and wiser than you, and you still give me just solid gold.
Well, we could
Can you hypnotize people?
No, that's not in my will. And the thing is, we could tell stories on each other from our days. Hopefully we forgot all that.
I'm not even embarrassed anymore. And if I don't have a good story, I'll make it up about my friends. So don't even go down that path.
Yeah, but
it's like Photoshop on stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And but if I can serve anybody listening to this podcast, they can call me directly. I give out my personal cell number. It's 405-833-7229. If I can come do the training at your company, serve your company, I pray that you never have a crisis, but we will sooner or later. If you don't have an EAP provider, I'll come and be on site with you and live life with you. And this is my passion. This is what gets me up of a morning. I'm still in the ministry. I'm still a chaplain. I love the faith-based side of it. But one of my best friends, he's actually a board member to the nonprofit ministry that I have. And I do this under an LLC, so it's not the ministry side. It's actually a for-profit LLC. He goes, Thomas, I've never seen somebody get excited about a crisis. He goes, you're weird. But it's because that's what your gift is.
You are, but that's why, I don't, all my friends, I don't collect, regular friends. We're all weirdos.
Yeah, he said when there's a crisis, you want to be the person that's called because you love to help people during that difficult time. And that's really what I was created for.
Servant's heart, this guy.
So if I can serve you guys, man, give me a call or go to my website, tbgroupllc.com. tbgroupllc.com.
tbgroupllc.com. Man, reach out, if you're in oil and gas or really any industry at all, but see the value in a proactive safety culture and mental health culture. This is somebody I recommend.
Cool, man. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. God bless you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.